Hello and welcome to the Devoted Outdoorsman Podcast.
What is up, guys? I hope you guys have been having an awesome week and you're ready for this week's podcast. So, I don't know about you, but I am so ready to get out after some turkey, man. You know, I've been driving up and down the roads around the house, and I've just been seeing turkey everywhere. And it's just been getting me so excited for turkey season, you know. I don't really turkey hunt that much, but I'm hoping to make it out a few times this year with some family friends and my buddy Josh. With that being said, I want to go ahead and talk to you guys a little bit about this week's podcast. This week's guest is Bruce. His name is Bruce, but he goes by Haas, and he's an awesome dude, and he's kind of like an archery guru. He's full of all kinds of knowledge when it comes to archery, arrow setup, broadheads, and all kinds of information like that. So we're going to go ahead and start this podcast off like always. Bruce is going to tell us a little bit about how he got introduced into the outdoors, and then we're kind of have like an archery BS type thing. We talk about broadheads, arrows, practice regiments, and stuff like that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this week's podcast. All right, Bruce, it's up to you, man. If you want to start it off by telling us a little bit about how you got hooked on the outdoors, that would be awesome.
Well, it was kind of interesting, you know. I mean, my grandfather was my best friend growing up, and I always heard him talking about it, and I never got a chance to do it with him. He was just a little bit too up there in age, and he couldn't get around much anymore. We'd go shooting and stuff like that, but he always talked about how he enjoyed the deer hunt back in Minnesota, and one thing he'd never got a chance to shoot was a hog. Always wanted to shoot a hog, never got a chance to take time to do it, and he'd kill some bears and stuff like that, and he would always just talk. I remember my dad, my uncles, and my grandfather, when I was real young, they'd always go away for a week at a time, and they'd all go to hunting camp, and I'd hear stories about that when it was just the guys around, and never really got a chance to take part with it, unfortunately, until after he passed away. And when he did, it kind of sparked a fire up under me. You know, I mean, I grew up on a cattle ranch, so, you know, I was always outside, but it was in Arizona, so I was in the desert most of the time. And, you know, I just, basically from his stories. And it really sparked a fire up underneath me when he passed away, and we never got a chance to share that. So now I kind of made it a point to get out and experience those things and kind of be able to share that and be there with him there. And it kind of sounds weird, but that's kind of how I got started.
Yeah, man. So I think a lot of people, like, I feel like I say this in every podcast, but I feel like a lot of people get introduced into the outdoors by a family member, whether that be like your dad or your grandfather or, you know, a brother or sometimes even cousins. But like a lot of times I talk to people and they were introduced by, you know, something odd, something different. And it's like they were introduced because they were at Bass Pro Shop one day and somebody started talking to them about it, and then they ended up just taking them and they got hooked. And, you know, I think it's just crazy, all the different scenarios of how people end up in the outdoors and all the different stories and everything. So going forward from there, you're a pretty badass when it comes to archery, aren't you?
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I consider myself, you know, above average maybe, but, I compete on the national ASA circuit, and you want to talk about badasses, there's a bunch of them there. they try to stick it to me about every time I show up, and they're pretty successful so far, but I love it.
Well, I just remember in the last conversation that we had, you were talking kind of about your practice schedule, and I was just blown away with how much that you actually practice and the scenarios that you practice in.
Yeah, well, see, I've got multiple jobs, so my main source of income, I've been a truck driver for 10 years now. I quit driving semis about 2 years ago, and I bought me a pickup truck, and now I haul campers out of northern Indiana where they're all made, and I deliver them to all of the lower 48 states to the dealerships. Still got to run logbooks. I'm still running my 14 hours a day, just like every other truck driver out there. I run 6-7 days a week normally. So practice schedule is pretty tough. And I'll try and find a shop when I find one that's big enough that I can pull a trailer into, or if I'm happen to be bobtailed with no trailer and I'm heading back. But most of the time, man, I take my 30-minute break on my logbook and I'm pulling into a rest area, and I walk off in the woods with my target and my bow, and I shoot for 30 minutes. And then at the end of the day, I mean, if it's dark outside and there's nobody out there, I'll shine the headlights out there and I'll get some reps in with the bow, and that's about how I have to get it done. If you want to make it, man, you want to stay on top of things, you got to take every opportunity you can and don't make excuses. Just shoot your bow.
Yeah, man, you got to get it in when you can. And that's pretty cool, man, that you stop in those rest areas and everything. I guess I never really thought about that, especially with you being kind of like a nomad as you're traveling around delivering all these trailers and everything. It would be hard to find a place to practice. You know, I never would have thought about that, but that's probably a good spot to do it.
Yeah, it's not exactly legal all the time, but most people, when they find out that, you know, I compete on a high level and, you know, my life revolves around archery and that kind of thing, and once they kind of find that out, nobody really cares too much because I'm doing it in a safe manner. You know, if there's no way to do it in a safe manner, if I can't get away from folks, typically I won't actually get real reps in with my bow, but I've actually got a training device that I use as well. So if I can't get reps in with my bow, I'll use a shot trainer.
And how does that device actually work?
Well, that's pretty neat. So it's Sure Shot, and it's basically it's kind of like the AccuBow in a way. And I hate to say that because everybody's mainstream, they know what it is. These guys were actually around a lot. They were around first, and they're actually out of Arizona. And I can get you guys I'll get you a link or something. You can link this in there to go check it out. Instead of strength training, this one here, you dial it into your actual draw length, and you can set the actual holding weight. So it's strictly working the release and shot process instead of having to hold back all that weight. So you can really work the actual process at full draw. Yeah, you can set it up with weights, and they've got weight screws and everything else, and the spots for your stabilizers. You can put your actual stabilizers on it if you want to. You can put on the bottom, there's a threaded hole where you can actually screw plate weight on there, and you can weight this thing to weigh the exact same amount as your actual shooting bow.
So it sounds like somebody put a lot of thought into this. So, I mean, that would help you know, your form, I would feel, and strength.
Yeah, all the way around, man. And they've got a couple of more attachments that they're coming out with. Obviously, they've got the red dot laser sight on there. It shoots a laser out. Then they got these little targets you can set up and actually hold on. But they've got an electronic one that's getting ready to come out. And I can't wait I'm going to get a prototype of that when they get all the bugs worked out. And that one's going to be kind of cool because you'll be able to actually hold on this thing during the whole shot, and it'll actually give you feedback and tell you if you dropped your bow arm, if you punched the trigger because the light went up and to the left or whatever. It'll actually keep track of all of that.
So whenever those go on the market, I definitely need to invest in one of those because that might be the only way that I become a good archery shot.
They're on the market now. And like I said, I'll give you the info when we're here, and you guys can link it, and everybody can go check it out. You can go buy them right now.
Well, do that for sure. When we get off here, go ahead and send me that link, and I'll make sure I put it in the show notes because that's definitely something I feel would be beneficial for just about anybody that is trying to pick up a bow, especially like a beginner or something like that. Because I know a lot of times when people are just starting out, they're having a lot of issues with, you know, the form and everything like that. That would help them. Definitely would help them.
Oh, yeah. Especially if you're going to be using back tension, because anybody who's ever used a back tension release, I don't care what level you're at, you've punched yourself in the mouth I don't know how many times. And that's because of the actual draw weight of your bow, not the holding weight. So this is a good way to learn how to use a back tension release, or any release, really. I mean, to get the trigger set right, if you got a thumb button or something of that nature, perfect way to get it done right without the dangers of losing teeth.
Yeah, because nobody wants to lose teeth.
Yeah, well, I've got 2 of them missing because of a back tension release, so you shoot enough, it's bound to happen.
Yeah, that's kind of like when people say, you know, if you hunt long enough, you're going to have some missed stories.
It's bound to happen. I mean, you're going to make bad shots. You're going to make, you know, you can't control an animal, you know, and that's just a fact of the nature, you know, the nature of the business, man. It's you can't control animals. You don't know what they're thinking. You don't know what they're going to do. And very rarely is the situation going to be perfect. So you got to be able to prepare for the worst case scenario. And I mean, we actually got into a conversation about that last time we talked. And, you know, that's kind of how I base my setup for hunting is worst case scenario. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
Yeah, man, you were saying last time we were talking that when you practice sometimes, you kind of blew my mind when you started talking about different angles also. And then you were talking about how you've practiced shooting through like brush just so you know that your arrow can make it, that you can make that shot. And that's something I've never actually really thought about before is one, putting the target at an angle and practice angle shots, because you're right. You never get a deer that sets perfectly broadside. There's always a little bit of a turn to it or, something in the way. So I feel like that's a great way for people to practice.
Practice with a lot of people. I've gone to backyard shoots. I've gone to ranges with guys on 3D courses, just playing around, practicing for hunting, not necessarily for competition. And everybody wants to shoot at these things perfectly broadside. I don't know about you, man. I haven't killed a whole ton of animals. There's guys out there who killed a lot more than I have, but I've killed quite a few. And I think I've killed one that was standing perfectly broadside. The rest of them all had angle shots to them, some sort of an angle issue. Then you got to start talking about bone structure and everything else for proper arrow placement. And if you don't practice that kind of stuff and really get into the nitty gritty of it, you're headed for a bad road. I mean, and it's bound to happen. You might get lucky and sneak one through there, but eventually you're going to have a problem. And it all could have been avoided just by, practicing different. And like you said, shooting through brush, I travel the country, for a living. So I have the benefit of moving from state to state to state, and I can put in for tags everywhere. I can get over-the-counter tags from all kinds of different states. I love the Western hunt. I mean, I grew up in the West, so, wide open spaces, stuff like that. You can get out to Kansas, and it's all brushy and, wheat fields and stuff like that. And most people have no clue what their arrow's going to do when you shoot through something like that. They think that the deer's going to tower over it, and then you get out there, and the deer walks through, and they think they're okay, and they wonder why they miss. And these are things you got to take into consideration. Again, prepare for the worst, hope for the best.
Yeah, and I remember last time we were talking, I kind of brought up a fact that, you say you practice from different positions, like you practice from kneeling, you practice from sitting down, because, a few years ago I had this lease, and I was doing a lot of hunting out of a blind with my son, and, so I practiced sitting in a chair, but the night that this deer actually came out, that evening, I actually had to shoot kneeling, and I had never practiced that before. And I actually missed this deer at 17 yards. I mean, that's a chip shot. I should have been able to do that with my eyes closed, but I missed it at 17 yards.
You're using a whole different set of muscles. You got your glutes and the back of your hams engaged at that point. And if you're not used to supporting that weight in a still, without motion, being still and holding your weight in order to be steady with your bow, your legs and your hips will start to quiver. And if you're not used to that, that's going to add a lot of movement in your sight picture, and even at 17 yards, man, if you don't have your scope housing centered with your peep sight and you don't have your grip right, and all of a sudden now the whole upper half of your body's quivering, that's bad medicine, man.
Oh, and it was. It wasn't even just a little miss either, because I could see my nocturnal, and it went way over, and it blew my mind. I thought for sure, that I hit something, and I just played it over and over into my head, and I was just like, man, I just, had never shot like this before. So we
all have to do it, you got to go through it to learn. You got to fail in order to learn, and that's just the way it is. And with bow hunting, if you're gonna be a bow hunter, you have a lot more failures than you are gonna have successes. So it's an opportunity to do a lot of learning. But yeah, from different positions, seated position on the ground, leaning up against a tree, kneeling, tree stand shots, because I just recently started within the last, 4 or 5 years, started hunting out of a tree stand in the Midwest when I do that for whitetails. And, you never know what position you're going to have. And another thing that a lot of folks don't do, especially those of you that live in the Midwest or the Northeast, and every time I talk to somebody, I tell them I'm from Arizona. Oh man, I want to go out west and hunt elk. Okay. How far away do you shoot deer? 30 yards, 35 yards? You better learn to shoot further. And you have to understand something. When you shoot further, any problems in your form whatsoever are magnified the further out you go. So you better learn how to shoot longer ranges. And it's not the efficacy of it that you need to worry about. You build your setup for that type of shot, and you have to practice at those distances. Also, a lot of guys, you talk to them about first, second, and third axis on their sights themselves, and a lot of guys that are strictly hunters have no clue what a third axis is. And a third axis is super important to make sure that that's right, because if you go out west and you hunt elk, chances are you're not shooting flat ground. You're going to be on the side of a mountain that's at a 30-degree pitch, and you got to shoot uphill or downhill. If that third axis isn't set, you ain't going to hit the broadside of a barn. And these are all things that you got to plan for.
So when you're practicing, like, what distances do you practice at?
So because I'm from Arizona and I started hunting, where the area that I hunt in is Unit 24B, and it's actually literally my backyard. And it's known as a predominantly rifle unit. Biggest thing we have out there that's even resembling a tree is a saguaro cactus or a palo verde bush. Very little cover, wide open. And for the first few years, I'd never even drawn back on an animal under 60 yards. So I got in the habit from the get-go. If I'm going to go out and I'm going to practice let's say I'm going to practice for an hour today, right? I'm going to spend the first 45 minutes at 120 yards. I do not move off that 120-yard mark, and I practice and I shoot groups at 120. And then for the last 15 minutes, I'll come back down and I'll check my sight marks at, 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, for the last 15 minutes.
And 120 yards, that's out there, man. A lot of people don't even think that you can shoot that far with a bow.
Oh yeah. Oh, you can shoot that far. And if you know how to set up your arrows right, a lot of people think that it's light and fast for flat shots, and they couldn't be more wrong. You know how to set up your equipment right, you can hammer at 120 yards. Oh yeah.
So, what kind of bow are you using?
Well, as far as sponsorships, a bow manufacturer is the only one I don't currently have, and there's a reason for that. I like to kind of play around a little bit. Currently, I'm using a Hoyt Nitram 34. Not Nitram, sorry. I just got rid of that, but I'm shooting a Hoyt Carbon Defiant 34 at a 29-inch draw, right at 72 pounds maxed out. But more importantly, a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on the bow. I'm an arrow guru and an arrow geek. And I'm one of those guys that I'm a very, very big firm believer that it doesn't matter what bow you shoot. It matters what arrow you build to fit the quarry that you're hunting and the situation that you're hunting. And I can pretty much build any arrow, and I can grab any bow and build an arrow to fit it and shoot it extremely well. I mean, I can take a 1980s bear bow and build the arrow to fit proper and shoot it just as good as I can my 2017 Defiant. It's just as effective. So I don't shoot light and fast. Unfortunately, this industry is kind of weird about that. If you notice, every year they come out with a bow, the bows are getting faster and faster and faster. And everything seems to be revolving around IBO speed. Everybody wants to stand at the line and beat their chest when they're with their buddies and say, my hunting arrow, quote unquote, is going 300 feet per second or 290 something feet per second. And they don't realize that they're actually setting themselves up for failure. And don't get me wrong, light, fast arrows kill all the time. And I'm not saying they can't. But in those situations we talked about, preparing for the worst, I can tell you right now, you get a nice, big, thick-bodied, Midwest whitetail, north of 200 pounds, nice, mature buck, and he comes in, he's hard-quartering to you. He's standing out there at 35 yards, and the only shot you have is to go through the front shoulder. Your 290 per second bow shooting a 380 or 400 grain arrow isn't going through. It doesn't matter. It's not going to go through. You're going to wound that animal. So I opt for a much heavier setup. My current hunting arrow right now is total weight of 625 grains. So it's pretty heavy. I focus on FOC. So mass weight and FOC. So if you bump your FOC up, concentrating the weight in the front of the arrow, it's not only going to bump your total arrow weight up, but you're also going to bump your FOC numbers up, your percentage. So mine's currently 625 grains with 24.5% FOC.
And with you shooting an arrow that weighs that much, do you worry at all about your arrow not traveling fast enough?
Never. there's been studies done. There was an actual video study done of a guy that he shot 100 deer. 50 of them were shot with a compound bow, and 50 of them were shot with a recurve. And during the video, he doesn't tell you which 50 he shot with which bow until the very end. And the study was done to show that most of the people that are worried about deer jumping the string are worrying about nothing. They actually need to start worrying about themselves more than the deer jumping the string, the speed of their bow, because all of the deer that jumped the string on him within these 100 shots actually jumped the compound, not the recurve. And you can tell in the video that the deer was actually aware that something wasn't right. You can see that they're nervous. Their tail's not moving around. It's straight up, and they're looking around, and they're real jumpy. You can tell when a deer knows something's up. Therefore, all of his muscles are coiled, and they're ready to go. So the first sound he hears, he's already made the decision. If I hear something, I'm gone. But if you shoot at a deer when he's calm, he doesn't even know you're there, and he doesn't think that there's something up. He's feeding, and he's just completely calm. By the time your bow goes off and your arrow travels from point A to point B, he doesn't have enough time to determine the sound that he hears. Oop, okay, here's something. Now he has to decide, is it something that I need to run from? By the time he makes that second judgment call, the arrow's already there. And, I mean, look at the natives. The natives have been using longbows or stick bows since the beginning of time, and almost wiped out, most of the animals in North America doing it. So it's not the sound, it's not the speed you got to worry about, it's the sound of your bow. And shooting at the proper time. So anytime you add mass weight for arrow to your compound, it's actually going to make it quieter. So the guys that are worried about the deer jumping the string because of the sound of the bow or whatever, use a heavier arrow, quiets the bow, the deer can't hear it, deer can't move.
And, I think that stuff like this is stuff that people actually need to hear, because that's not what the archery industry is making people believe. They're making people believe that they need a bow that shoots, 350 feet per second or whatever it may be, because that's what they're trying to sell to people today.
Yep, that's what they're trying to sell. In the industry, I love this industry, don't get me wrong, but it's definitely being coerced for the big names in the industry, bow manufacturers, that kind of thing, because everybody's trying to, look at year to year when these bows come out, right? Is the technology really changing that much? I don't really think it is. They're getting an extra 5 feet per second, and that's their new bow. It's all a speed game. And then you have broadhead companies and stuff like that are kind of following suit with this whole mechanical thing. Don't get me wrong, mechanicals kill every day too. But the way a lot of this stuff is made is not made for the unperfect shot. It's only made for that perfect scenario. All the way down to my broadhead choice, I pick a broadhead that is designed for the worst case scenario, which is going to be a hard bone impact. So I shoot broadheads that are designed for breaching bone. I shoot for that worst case scenario. That way, when I do have a good scenario that shows up and I've got them perfectly broadside and I can put it through nothing but flesh, not have to worry about bones, it's going to zip right through.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about that unperfect shot. You know that your arrow or your broadhead setup is going to end up putting a lethal shot on that animal.
Absolutely. And, the setup I have right now, I would take anywhere in the world, including Africa, and there's no animal on this planet that I wouldn't shoot, minus maybe an elephant. Anything else out there, I would have no problems drawing back and sending it.
Yeah, I can see why hunting or shooting an elephant with a bow could be a task, all in itself.
It's definitely a task. It's done though. We'll do it all the time. My arrow's not quite heavy enough for that, just because of the sheer density of the bone. Those guys that are shooting elephants with bows, they're shooting 1,000 to 1,100 grain arrows. They're big and heavy.
Yeah, that's crazy to think about, shooting 1,100 grains out of a bow.
Yeah. Well, and again, people nowadays, and I can't stress enough, man, it's all about the arrow setup. And, I mean, that's kind of what we gear towards on one of my other jobs that I do. So I'm the national sales manager, staff shooter coordinator, and product designer over at Ethics Archery. And we're a component company, a precision component company. And we've been coming out with quite a few different options for everybody, whether you're a speed freak and you like that flat shooting, light, fast arrow, or you're like me and you want to shoot high energy, high kinetic energy, high momentum, just bone crushing arrows. We have anything for any build. If you're going to Africa, you can find what you need right with us. If you're going to go shoot a 3D tournament and you need something light and fast for, an unknown yardage, we've got that too. And we do not just hunting arrows, but we do target arrow stuff as well. And that being said, we are also the proprietors of the spinning technology of the spinning insert. And so everything that we've built, we've geared towards arrow builders and shops and people to finally take a little bit more interest in starting to get a little bit more custom with their hunting setups, because we all know that target archers, right? If you've ever met a target archer, a lot of hunters will roll their eyes. You weigh out one of my arrows and they all weigh exactly the same, down to the 10th of a grain, right? And they go, oh, that's not really worth it. Well, here's the thing. If a target archer is so worried about absolute precision and all he's shooting is foam or paper, don't you think as hunters we should be even more into that? Because we're shooting at a live animal, man. I mean, we owe it to the animal to be as precise as we possibly can. So we're trying to change the way people think about their arrow setups and get a little bit more involved and get a little bit more custom, because the stuff that's offered with these arrow manufacturers today, it's just something to screw a field pointer broadhead into. There's nothing else there. Our products that we make are geared towards precision and lethality. And more people need, in my opinion, in the hunting world, need to start taking a little bit more care and a little bit more interest in building the right arrow setup. There's fads that go around, right? Like right now, I'm not going to mention a company name, but you all know who I'm talking about. There's a big fad with mechanical broadheads now, and why? Nobody can sit and tell me that their broadhead choice has been chosen specifically for lethality. The only argument that anybody has that shoots mechanicals on lethality is bigger cutting diameter. Okay, I get that. But if you put the arrow where it needs to be because you built your arrow to be more accurate, then it doesn't matter how much cutting diameter you have, because the arrow is going to be placed where it needs to be placed. You can kill an animal with a field point. Absolutely. Is it legal? Absolutely not. Is it ethical? Absolutely not. You definitely need blades on there. But the fact of the matter is shot placement's key. And sometimes shot placement required. Most of these mainstream broadheads are not built to take that beating. How many animals have you shot with mainstream broadheads today that, the average stuff that you find in your shots? How many of those have you shot and broke a blade off? Or the blade's just warped all get out. I mean, it's just warped when you find it. That's not set up for lethality. You want something that's got super thick blades, something that's got more of like a Tanto style point on it, and you want the thick blades because I use this analogy. When you go out and chop wood, you can chop wood with an axe and it cuts the wood, right? Well, that's kind of like a mainstream broadhead or a mechanical broadhead. It's made for cutting, but it's a lot easier to use an awl, a wedge-style axe, because it's made for splitting that wood. Well, why wouldn't you want the same thing in a broadhead? You want the broadhead to be able to split bone when it contacts that bow.
No, I know. I get where you're going. I mean, it's like, you know, just like you were saying, we were talking about a minute ago, you know, the industry's pushing, you know, bows that shoot speed. And they're kind of pushing the whole mechanical thing at this point in time too, because that's what's selling right now. And, you know, they work. We're not downing people that do use mechanical. I use mechanical broadheads, and I've used fixed blade broadheads. And I've had instances where I wish I was using a fixed blade when I was using my mechanicals, where, you know, either it has opened up in flight or, you know, like we were talking about earlier, where I had to take a not opportune shot and it actually, you know, ended up opening up because I hit a twig or whatever it was. And, you know, when one of those open up in flight, that's it. I mean, it's going to go wherever it wants to go because, you know, it loses its accuracy, loses its flight paths.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up because we've actually developed a product called the spinning insert, and it actually gets rid of that, believe it or not. If anything, it's an insurance policy strictly for guys that shoot mechanicals. Now, that's not why we built it. It's got a lot of other properties that can be used with any broadhead that are going to be massive benefits, right? But just that instance right there, I actually do demonstrations every day when I go into shots with the spinning insert. So we all know, just like you said, when you shoot one and the blade opens up prematurely in flight, there's no telling where that arrow is going to go. It is, the arrow flight is so erratic, it's not even funny. But I do demonstrations every day where you can actually take a mechanical broadhead, and I'll take like a Schwacker 2-blade, and I'll cut the band off of it, and I'll shoot it deployed on purpose. I'll even take one blade shut and leave one open, and still hit the kill zone on where I'm shooting at. Because it allows the spinning, allows the blades, it allows the broadhead to spin completely independent from the arrow shaft. So if it's not forcing the blades to turn, then it can't plane. So the biggest benefit of this thing is when it hits an animal. So instead of utilizing energy to cut bone, everything naturally wants to take the path of least resistance, right? But when you have a fixed blade and a fixed or any kind of broadhead and when it's fixed to the arrow and it can't move, has to move the whole arrow, it has to utilize energy to either cut or break the bone. But with a spinning insert, when it hits bone, it's actually able to rotate, the broadhead rotates on its own to take the path of least resistance without changing the angle of the arrow, which creates more friction, which minimizes penetration. So with a spinning insert, when it rotates and it doesn't change the angle of the arrow, you're still getting driving force without that added drag, so you're actually going to maximize penetration in that situation. So those spinning broadheads are awesome, especially for guys that do want to shoot a mechanical, like yourself. You've had an issue where they've opened up in flight, right? Well, if you'd had a spinning insert on there, that could have been the insurance policy to where that arrow is still going to hit its mark.
Yeah, and I really wish, you know, at that point in time, I would have had a device like that because, you know, it was actually a pretty nice buck that I missed because of that. And, you know, I knew it as soon as that arrow left, I knew it because I could hear it. You know, I could hear it whistling. It was like, and I was like, okay, something's not right. But, you know, that was it. And it you know, it made me real upset. But moving forward from there, I've seen some of these demonstration videos where you're shooting center blocks with some of your guys' products.
Yeah. So the products that we've designed over at Ethics Archery so again, I'm a big proponent of lethality, right? Penetration is key on anything. Doesn't matter the angle, what you're looking for is penetration. Period. So the number one rule of penetration is structural integrity. So as soon as any part of your setup bends or gets misaligned in any way on a hard impact, your penetration and your momentum, your kinetic energy, all of it is gone. It's done. You break a blade off, it's done. It's gone. So when we build our products, everything's made out of 303 stainless steel. And when we build these things, our testing is actually done on not just cinder blocks. I've got another video that I did with our new outsert system, which I personally designed this one. And It's my baby. I'm pretty proud of it. I shot a 50-gallon propane tank at 12 yards with it, point blank. And I shot that arrow 5 times and still had no failures. I still have that arrow in the house today that I can still hunt with no bending, no breaking the arrow, nothing.
That's pretty insane. You shot a propane tank with it and it's still fine. You know, I would think that it would make it splinter, you know, it would make it start separating, but, you know, I guess, you know, with the products that you guys have over there, it's keeping it from doing that because it's made with quality materials and everything like that. And just the design of the spinning insert probably helps too.
Yeah, well, this was actually done with this one's static. It doesn't spin. It's an outsert system, so it's made for the 166 inside diameter arrows, like your Victory VAP, your Pierce Platinums, you know, those types of arrows. We've also retrofitted that exact same design to fit a 204. First company ever to come out with an outsert system that fits a 204 inside diameter, kind of like the Victory Rip or like an Easton Axis or something of that nature. And the design itself, so the reason why it's not blowing arrows up and splintering arrows is because of the way it was designed. You know, that's been a big problem with a lot of the components that are on the market today, is if you do have a hard impact, you know, it's causing an arrow failure. So I wanted to try to address that the best I could. Obviously, you're not going to be able to, I'm not saying you're going to buy this and go shoot an iron buck challenge and shoot every single one of them in the steel and never break an arrow, because I'm not saying that. But it definitely helps. So the way it's designed, it's a 2-piece system, and the stem that actually fits into the arrow is about 3 inches long, and it's fully adjustable. There's cut marks in each one of them, so you can adjust the weight to whatever you want to get that dynamic spine correct on your arrow, so you get perfect arrow flight. So you can adjust it to the spine. So once you figure that out, you put that in, you glue it, and then it's got a sleeve that fits over top of it. And it actually covers about 5/8 of an inch of the arrow shaft. So if you notice, most components on the outsert components on the market, they only cover like 1/8 of an inch, maybe 1/4 of an inch of the actual carbon. Well, ours goes 5/8 of an inch. And inside the first, I think it's the first 3/8 of an inch of that outsert sleeve that's made of 303 stainless is actually solid stainless steel. It doesn't even go all the way inside. And the reason why that was designed that way is for a hard impact, like on steel or hard bone, because it redirects all of the energy that was transferred into the field point or the broadhead on that hard impact. It transfers it in a 365-degree manner and transfers that evenly down the shaft through the outsert sleeve. So when I talk precision and fitment and everything like that, another problem with the industry.
All right, guys, I'm not really sure what just happened, but we had a little bit of a technical difficulty, but we are back now, and we'll get this all taken care of.
Yeah. So, like I was saying before, you know, it was all of these thought processes have gone into the designing of these products for structural integrity and for adjustability. So if anybody hasn't had a chance or never heard of Ethics Archery, go take a look at it, man. It'll be the highest quality, most precise components you've ever even put in your hands. Like we guarantee that. We're 100% American made and veteran owned. So you know, trying to keep it local, and you know, based on the quality that we have of our products, super affordable as well. And you ever have a question, when you call in, if you got a technical question, you've got a question about product, you're going to talk to me directly, or you're going to talk to the owner of the company. So you're not going to get somebody recorded. You're not going to get somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about. You know, if somebody does happen to answer the phone that can't answer the question, they're not even going to try. They're going to just straight up tell you, hey, you need to talk to Haas. So you're going to get, you know, that small company kind of feel, because we are a small company. So yeah, definitely check them out.
Is there anybody else you need to plug, man?
You know, There's quite a few, actually. No. Some of my personal sponsors that I use, Montana Black Gold Sights, awesome guys. AEP Stabilizers. Nunzio Marino's an awesome guy. Victory Arrows, that's who I shoot for. That's my arrow of choice. Brian's Custom Lenses. I can go down a whole list. I mean, there's the companies that are out there today. We all have our brand loyalty, right? We all have the people that we either shoot for and we're sponsored by them, or it's just products that we really like to use. But realistically, everybody out there is putting out pretty good products, man. I mean, the archery industry from where it was 10, 20 years ago to where it is now has made leaps and bounds. So, don't put so much emphasis on brands. Let's put the emphasis on what works for you and what allows you to get out in the woods and enjoy it.
So I completely agree with what Haas was saying. It's not necessarily the brand you use. It's not the brand of bow you use. It's not the brand of arrow you use. It's really just whatever gets you out there to enjoy the outdoors. That's what really matters. And that's why we're outdoorsmen. That's what created our love to begin with, was the love for the outdoors. With all that being said, I want to talk to you guys about Haas. He is going to start coming on the podcast like once a month, and we're going to be breaking down stuff like arrow building and bow tuning, practice regiments. We're going to go like in depth with these things. So each month when I post up the episodes on the Facebook page, make sure you guys comment in the section below to let us know things you would like to see us talk about or hear us talk about. If you want to hear us go in depth about broadhead setup or like inserts or, bow tuning or the 3 axes. If there's anything you guys want to talk about, just make sure you comment there, and then we'll cover it in one of the podcasts. So that's pretty exciting. There's lots of new and big things coming in the 2018 podcast season. So I hope you guys enjoyed this week's podcast. Like always, if you guys will take a minute out of your day to go like and subscribe to our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, and make sure you hit that subscribe button to wherever you listen to the podcasts at. That way, every week when I upload a new episode of the Devoted Outdoorsman, it'll automatically be downloaded on your phone. You won't have to go search for it. You won't have to do anything. It'll just automatically be right there. So, lots of exciting and new things coming to the Devoted Outdoorsman. Me and Haas are going to start a new series once a month. He's going to come on and we're going to talk archery. Me and Joshua are going to continue to keep doing the Land BS podcast. If you guys haven't already checked that out, make sure you go listen to them. Basically, it's just me and Josh goofing off, but, it's kind of interesting to listen to. And it helps you guys get to know us a little bit better, because in the upcoming seasons, we will be doing a lot more video content, and I'm sure lots of new Land BS podcast episodes. I'm also having some decals and koozies made, the Devoted Outdoorsman decals. You can put them on your back of your truck, you can put them on your toolbox, you can put them wherever you want. If you guys are interested in those, make sure you hit me up on the Facebook page and I'll get you set up. And it's a pretty cool design if you guys want to check it out on the Facebook page. I posted up a couple pictures of them, and then as soon as I get some in, I will be posting up pictures of the exact things that they will look like. With turkey season opening up across the nation, I hope you guys get out there and kill some gobblers and stay safe. Until next Saturday, the Devoted Outdoorsman logging off.